Good morning, everyone. Welcome once again to Mosaic Church Online. Juan, I'm so glad you could join me this morning.
Good morning, Ella. I'm also very happy to be here today.
Right.
How it has been your week?
It's been good. Last Saturday, I was able to be part of the food drive, and so it was so great to see that it was really organized and people are still helping, people are receiving. Overall, a great experience. And how was yours?
So my week has been very good. As you know, we are getting back into the normality. Again, I'm at the office, so I'm not longer working from home. And in one side, that has been very nice because I'm able to see again my colleagues. I miss that personal interaction with them. But at the same time, it has been a challenging week because, as you know, I'm working in the corporate world. So we're having challenging times. Some of our colleagues have been laid off. So it's also a difficult moment for us.
True. I could imagine emotions are running high everywhere, especially during these days. And speaking about that, we're continuing our series today, how to say no to the emotions that compete for control. Specifically today, we'll be talking about, this emotion that all of us struggle with every now and then, which is anger.
Yeah. Anger, and especially parents, in these last months, being with kids all around.
Yes.
So we need to have this patience. So of course I cannot complain of my little Nico, but it's an emotion that we should have under control.
And
anger.
I can't imagine you being an angry daddy. And speaking of that as well, we know that Father's Day is coming along real fast, and so we put together a little something for all Mosaic dads to show you how special you are to us. So take a look.
Amazing. I love all that reactions of our kids speaking about the dads.
That's so really cute, those little kids in the video.
Do you know which one I like the most?
Which one?
How old is your dad? 13 years old. So better I will not tell that kid. No way. So I will not tell Zeke how old I am. Let's say that I'm 15. Okay, for him. Do I look like this?
Sure, I can tell that.
Great. Very good. So let's start the service. We're going to be here around 45 minutes, and we're going to start with worship time. Okay, so OJ and the band are gonna lead us in worship, and we're gonna sing a song about how God is with us in all these difficult times.
And I wanted to share this verse that really stuck out to me this past week from Psalm 147, verse 6. The Lord sustains the humble. In verse 11, He delights in those who fear Him, who put their hope in His unfailing love. So I pray that we all put our hope in God's unfailing love, especially these hard days. Andy will give us today's message, and towards the end of today's service, we will be interviewing a professional therapist who will give us practical tips, really how to deal with all these big emotions that everyone is going through these days.
That's great. So as you have seen, God is with us, and also we are here for you. So that's why if you have any need, we're here to help you. Also, we're here to pray for you. So we're having an amazing team of hosts that is there to pray in case that you have any need. Just click on the prayer button, and we're gonna be hearing you, and we're gonna have a chat to see which are your needs and to be there for you. Okay, so I think that's all for us this morning. Yes. So I hope, guys, that you enjoy the service, and see you later.
Have a good day.
Anybody here been a victim of road rage? Anybody felt a victim? Yeah. Actually, more of you than you know. The reason you didn't raise your hand is you don't know what it is, okay? But road rage doesn't mean some angry person gets out of their car and marches back to your car in traffic and beats on your windshield. That is road rage, but it's broader than that. Road rage is really, I'll just give you the definition since we're talking about it. Aggressive or angry behavior exhibited by a driver. I bet you knew that. But here's the broad definition. So more of you have been, a victim, hopefully not a perpetrator, but a victim of, or maybe a perpetrator. I didn't ask you to raise your hands. Maybe we should go back. Anyway, behaviors include rude and offensive gestures. So most of us have been, verbal insults, physical threats, or dangerous driving methods targeted toward another driver or pedestrian, in an effort to intimidate or release frustration. And the thing that's so horrible about road rage is that it's focused on absolute strangers. People who are experiencing road rage, they're mad at someone, they don't even know who it is. They don't even know if it's male or female half the time because your windows are so tinted, right? Now, a percentage of us have experienced or been on, the giving side of some sort of road rage, but probably only a small percentage. But all of us have some sort of rage on the inside of us. All of us have some level of anger. We don't like the word anger because that doesn't sound very sophisticated. We're very sophisticated people. So we say, no, I don't have rage and I don't have anger. I just have frustration. I'm not angry. I'm frustrated. And frustration sounds so much nicer. Frustration is, you know what? There's something wrong out there. And I'm just responding in here, but it's not me. I'm not the source. I'm just responding to something out there. And whatever it is out there, it just frustrates me, but I'm not angry. I'm just frustrated. So while you're trying to figure out the difference between anger and frustration, I want to go ahead and catch you up on what we're talking about in this series, and then we will come back to that in just a minute. We're in the middle of a series, actually, part 4 of a 6-part series. It's called You're Not the Boss of Me. And we're talking specifically, this is kind of a how-to series, how to say no to the emotions that compete for control. Because all of us have emotions that compete for control of our mouth, and they compete for control of our moods. And Jesus said that the stuff that comes out of us or exudes from us that oftentimes offends other people and puts us at odds with God because it puts us at odds with other people, it actually comes out of us. And the reason it comes out of us is because it was in there to begin with. And the things that come out of us, according to Jesus, actually, he uses the word heart. It comes from our heart. In other words, it comes from us. So in this series, we are learning to monitor our hearts. Because from your heart comes the issues of life, as Solomon said. From our heart come the things that are both good and both bad. And all of us are good at monitoring our behavior. That's how you got here today. That's how you got married. You got a date, got a second date with the same person. You got a job. You're able to keep your job. You got a second interview. We're pretty good at monitoring our behavior. But Jesus is encouraging us and drawing us into a way of life where we monitor our heart. We monitor what's in there and we monitor what we allow down in there. Because when our emotions, in many cases, take control, things oftentimes get out of control. Whether it's guilt, we talked about that, or envy, we talked about that, or insecurity, or fear. We're going to talk about fear next week. And today, we're talking about anger. And here's what I know about you. This isn't a religious thing. This is just a human thing. Nobody wants anger to be the boss of them, right? I mean, you don't want anger to be your boss. And nobody who loves you wants anger to be the boss of you. And you don't want anger to be the boss of anybody that you love or you have to work with. We've seen what happens when that happens. We've been on the other side of anger or frustration or rage. And when we talk about anger, we're not just talking about extroverted anger, people who lose their temper. You may never raise your voice. You may be more like me. You don't lose your temper, but you're still scary because your moodiness, your silence is deafening. Your silence is intimidating. Your silence is controlling. And you pride yourself because you don't ever extrovert your anger, but you introvert your anger, and it has the same effect on the people closest to you. So whether you shove it down or whether you shut people down, anger is a bad boss. Unless, there is an exception to this, unless it's what I call, and maybe there's a better phrase for this, what I call crusader anger. This is a good anger. Crusader anger is when somebody gets angry at an injustice in the world or evil in the world or a disease in the world, and they finally get so frustrated and so angry, they step out and they say, you know what? Somebody needs to do something about this. So they go to work, and as a result of crusader anger, some incredible things have happened in the world. Child labor laws, women's suffrage, the civil rights movement, we could go on and on and on. All over the world throughout history, there have been men and women who finally got so fed up with something that needed to change, they had kind of this crusader anger, and it drove them to bring about change. But, and this is where we pivot back to most of us, crusader anger reflects concern over what other people aren't getting that they deserve. The frustration and the anger that drives us crazy and messes up our relationships and causes us to look in the mirror at times and think, why did I say that? Why do I think that? Why do I behave that way? Is the anger that comes from what happens when I'm not getting what I'm sure I deserve. When you're not getting what you're sure you deserve. So there's a parallel, there's a similarity. One is constructive. One, as you already know, is extraordinarily destructive. Now, James, the brother of Jesus, which is such a fascinating thought anyway, and we won't go into that, but James, the brother of Jesus, who lived in the first century, obviously, emerged after Jesus' resurrection as a leader in the local church. And he writes this letter to Christians, primarily to Jewish Christians, and it is full of wisdom. And in this letter that's called the book of James, that you can find in your New Testament, in this book, James gives us a principle. And of all the principles, the life-changing principles in the world, I think there are two that are just so extraordinary that if people can get their minds and hearts around these two ideas, it changes everything, especially relationally. And James gives us one of these principles. So I want to walk you through what James says. It's going to be a little bit offensive maybe. It's going to make you kind of push back a little bit and say, I don't know if it's that simple, but I'm telling you, if you, whatever age you're in, wherever you are in relationships, if you will embrace this principle that James gives to us, it will do more to keep anger from ever becoming the boss of you than anything else you can do. And that's a promise. Here's what James says. He asks two questions. The first one is this. He says, who is wise and understanding among you? And he's not asking anybody to raise their hand, and I'll explain why in a minute. Who is wise and understanding? Wisdom means who has insight. Wise people understand that life is connected. Wise people understand the past impacts the future and the present impacts the future. That what's going on now is going to show up later, that life is connected. So James says, okay, do you think you're wise? Do you think you're insightful? Do you know how to keep things in perspective? He says, if so, I want to challenge you. Let me see your wisdom and let me see your understanding by the deeds you do and the humility that comes from wisdom. Because wise people, this is so important, wise people are always humble. Because arrogance doesn't make any sense. Arrogance is irrational. Arrogance flies in the face of everything we know about how the world works and how people are. He says, so if you're wise, I want to see your wisdom and how you live your life, and it's going to be exported through your humility, because wisdom always leads to humility. Wisdom understands. That's what wisdom is. Wisdom is understanding how the world works, how things are. That's why the wiser you are, the more humble you're going to be, because humility makes more sense. But humility is in fact, humility is so powerful, but humility is not natural. Natural. Well, James tells us, he says, here's the opposite of all that. But if you harbor, that is, you allow it to dock. If you allow envy to dock, if you allow selfish ambition to dock, to harbor in your hearts, if you allow things that really fly in the face of reality, fly in the face of the way that the world really works, envy is, it's not fair. Well, life's not fair. Fairness ended in the Garden of Eden. Nothing's been fair since, right? How many of you can dunk a basketball, Right, exactly. So it's not fair, okay? But we tell our kids that all the time. He said, look, and don't boast. His wording is a little funky here. And don't boast about it or deny the truth. So, if you harbor bitter envy, you kind of keep it on the inside, and selfish ambition, it's all about you, because people who lack wisdom lack humility, and they make the world all about themselves. Making the world all about you is not wise. Making the world all about you doesn't even make any sense. He says, but if you're stuck there, if you allow that stuff to harbor in your heart and it becomes the filter through which you live, he said, you're just denying the truth. And wise people don't deny the truth. Wise people live in light of the truth. And then he tells us kind of what we already know. He says, because wherever you find this stuff lodged in a heart, wherever you find somebody deceived into thinking they're more than they really are and they lack wisdom and humility, for where you find this, he says, where you find this envy and selfish ambition, there you find, here it is, there you find disorder and every evil practice. And again, this is kind of his sort of complicated, wordy way of saying what Jesus said, that when things get lodged inside of us, they're eventually coming out of us. And where you have arrogance and a lack of understanding of how the world works and the way things really are and how dependent you are on the people around you and circumstances you had no control over, when you lose sight of that and arrogance gets lodged in your heart, eventually there's going to be disorder and every evil practice. Because people who allow these things to get lodged in their heart are able to justify just about anything. What's on the inside of you is coming for you. What's on the inside of you is coming for the people around you. So at this point, James is writing all this down, and it's like he pauses and thinks, okay, I got to get to the point. So he sort of laid the groundwork, and now he goes for his point. And now he tells us how to keep anger from lodging in our heart and how to keep anger from becoming the boss of us. But he launches into this part of the discussion with another question. And here's the question. He says, so having said all that, think about this. What causes fights? I've said if you have wisdom, you'll have humility, and humility leads to more wisdom and understanding about how the world works. And if you allow bitter envy and selfish ambition to lodge in your heart, then there's going to be disorder and fights. And if you don't believe me, then think about this. Where does that hostility, where do fights come from? What causes fights? What causes conflict? What causes fights, he goes on, and quarrels among you? Now, this is a really interesting question. What causes it? He's asking the question, what's the root cause? When some of you see this question, and when some of us see this question, we say, well, James, you're asking the question incorrectly. It's not what, it's who. It's who causes fights and who causes quarrels. And I know the answer to that. It's my mom. She will not mind her own business. I am an adult. I have my own family. And my mom just got to tell me how to parent, what to do. It's my 9th grade son. He knows everything. He knows everything. And the problem is he might really know everything. And everything I do is wrong. And he wins all the arguments. And I feel like, well, how did my 9th grade son get in control of our family? It's my boss. It's the manager at work that, she just, I don't know. There's something about her just grates on me. The problem is not a what, the problem is a who. And James is like, that's why we're talking about this. Because you're wrong. It's a what. It's not a who. And as long as you think it's a who, you will never get to the root of the real what. He says, come on. Who is wise and understanding among you? Don't they really come from your desires that battle inside of you? To which we say, no, they don't. Have you met? You need to meet my boss. Then you would understand the source of my quarrels. You need to meet my wife. I don't know. There's just something going on. You need to meet my husband. He used to be such a gentleman. The source of the fighting and the struggles and the quarrels among you, the source is something going on inside of you. They don't come from his or her inability to see the world the way that you see it, even though that's the way we often see it. Well, I think that, the reason we struggle is because you won't see things my way. And if I could just get you to see things my way, which of course is the right way, if I could just get you to see things my way, then when we wouldn't fight and quarrel. And James says, no, you don't understand the root. And as long as you think the source is out there, you're never going to deal with it. And you're actually going to feed something ugly and dangerous in here. Now, let me pause and say this. This principle, this thing he's teaching us, I'm telling you, it is life-changing. That's not hyperbole. It is relationship changing. It is relationship healing. In any relationship, if both parties can embrace what James is teaching us and telling us, it changes everything. So let me read the verse again. Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? And the answer is, yes, they do every single time. Because the reason we fight and the reason we quarrel and the reason we're angry is because there's something we want that we aren't getting. There's something we want that we aren't getting. There's something I want. I want respect from him, and I'm not getting respect. I just want you to come home on time because we talked about this 10 times, and you promised, and you won't come home on time. I just want you to give me a fair shot. I just want credit for my ideas. I'm upset, and I'm frustrated, and anybody that hears my story says, you're right, but the root of it is not out there. The root of it is in here because I'm not getting what I want. To which I know how you respond. You respond the same way I do. But wait a minute. But I earned it. Right. You earned it. And you want to get what you earned, right? Yeah, and you're not getting what you earned, right? So you're not getting what you want. Oh, well, yeah. But they promised. I mean, come on. They promised, and they didn't keep their promise. Right. So you want them to keep their promise. Yeah. So you're not getting what you want. Yeah. Okay, but it wasn't even just. I mean, what they did, anybody who heard my story, what they did wasn't fair. I know. And you want what's fair, don't you? Yes, I want what's fair. You're not getting what's fair, are you? No, you're not getting what you want. And I'm just telling you, if you can pause in the moment when the frustration or anger or rage or whatever word you want to use starts rising, and you can pause in the moment and recognize, you know what the problem is? Part of the problem is me. Now, see, parents, this should be so intuitive for us, right? If you're a parent and you have 2 little kids, or at any point had 2 little kids, because you're driving, remember, you got one hand on the wheel and one hand on the back seat, or 2 rows, and you're going, stop it, be quiet, and your kids are back here negotiating, going, he, she, and you're going, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I don't need to be the judge. I'm just the jury. You're both guilty, so be quiet and quit touching her and get on the, why? Because as the parent, you know, the problem isn't really the presenting problem. The problem is there's 2 kids in the back seat, and they both want something, and neither one of them are getting what they want. And it's like our Heavenly Father's going, there's a reason I ask you to call me Heavenly Father, because you're still like children. And at the source, at the root of every single argument and quarrel you've ever had, at the source, the source is not out there. It starts right here. You want something, and you're not getting it. And I'm telling you, the moment you begin to embrace this as a lifestyle, the temperature goes down, and anger will no longer be the boss of you. It won't control, as we're going to see, your moods or your mouth. Now, James goes on because he knows he's got to say this 2 or 3 more times because it's too easy to miss. He says, you desire, but you do not have, so you kill. And we're like, okay, that's got to be hyperbole. Well, it is, but it isn't. His point is this, and this is what should cause all of us to stop and at least consider whether or not this is true. His point is this. He's saying, look, if you don't recognize that the source and the root is in here, not out there, you will carry the potential to take things to an unhealthy, destructive extreme. As long as you think it's him, don't miss this, as long as you think it's him, and since you can't control him, you will feel like you have an excuse not to control you. As long as I think it's her, and it's 100% her, then since I can't control her, I give up all reasoning when it comes to controlling me because she deserves it, he deserves it, they deserve it, whatever it is. And James says, look, I'm telling you, the very thing that leads to murder, it is inside of you. Because what causes murder? Somebody wants something they can't get any other way, or they want something they can't get and it drives them to murder. Somehow it justifies a response and they blame the other person. And James says, hey, heads up. All of you wise people, all of you people that are wise and have understanding. That's inside of you. That's inside of you. To think for a moment that you don't have it in you to do something unhealthy to another person in order to get what you want, don't deceive yourself. Be humble enough to recognize, oh my goodness, that resides in me. Then he wraps up like this. He says, come on, you're envious and you can't obtain. You want it and you can't get there. You want a break, you're not getting a break. Everybody got theirs, you haven't gotten yours yet. Everybody got in, you didn't get in yet. Everybody drives one, you don't drive one yet. Everybody else's kids, everybody else. He says, you want it and you can't get, so you fight and you quarrel. You can't get from him what you want. You can't get from her what you want. You can't get the approval, the acceptance. I mean, just fill in the blank. We've all got that stuff. But his point is, come on. The source is not out there. The source is in here. We aren't getting our way. We aren't getting what we want. We're like the kids in the back seat, and our Heavenly Father's going, hey, stop it. I don't want to hear that. Hey, no. We're not going to talk about the details until you can get on your side of the car, your side of the van, your side of the vehicle, and think for a minute. Wait a minute. What's causing this? It's not her. See, again, if I shake you up, what comes out is what's in there. And you can't say, well, if you'd stop shaking me, this wouldn't be in here. No. What comes out is what's in there. And what does conflict do? Conflict just shakes us up. And what comes out? Oh, my goodness. I just want my way. I want what I deserve. I want what was promised. And of course, just to make sure you don't hear me saying something I'm not, of course there are circumstances that should upset you. And of course being treated unfairly should upset you. And of course not having a promise kept should upset you. But in the middle of the conversation, as it dawns on you, mature, wise people of understanding pause and say, you know what? Part of the problem is, not the whole problem, but part of the problem, my part of the problem, the source of the problem is, I'm not getting what I want. And I'm telling you, when you can own your slice of the argument pie, when you can own your slice of the argument pie, the temperature comes down and anger and rage and frustration will no longer be the boss of you. So I want to ask you a question. This isn't a James question. This is just a me question. What is your relationship with anger? I know it's an odd question. What is your relationship with anger? Do you let it boss you around? Do you allow it to get in control of your mouth or your mood? As I said earlier, I'm an introvert, so when I get angry, I go in and my moods are paralyzing. I mean, I've just had to learn, okay, but what is your relationship with anger? And are you ready to put an end to that? Or let me ask it a different way. If I were to ask your husband or your wife or your best friend, your roommate, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your best friend, hey, what is her talking about you? What is her talking about you? What is his relationship with anger? What would they say? And do you allow it to be the boss of you? Do you allow it to be the boss of you in one particular relationship because there's just somebody who just gets to you? Do you allow it to be the boss of you with certain kinds of people because those certain kinds of people, they just get to you? Is it the boss of you in one particular environment? Maybe just at home. Everybody at work just thinks you're the finest, kindest, amazing, most amazing person, and folks at home are walking around on eggshells. Are you ready to put an end to that? To do that, you'll have to humble yourself. This calls for humility. Humility is the most logical thing we can ever do. Humility makes sense. Arrogance makes no sense. Pride makes no sense. Arrogance and pride never lead anywhere good. Humility says, you know what? It's not all my fault. But you know what? I'm going to own my part of it. And I'm going to own my part of it to where anger no longer controls my mouth or my mood. Part of the problem is you're not getting your way. So, and only you know how this works. When you feel it rising up, and before this day is over for some of you, you're going to get to practice this. It just starts rising up. It's traffic. It's traffic. You starts rising up. You're at a restaurant and, it's just not what you ordered. Or it's something more serious. You get home and he didn't or she did or the kids or, you get to work tomorrow. It's going to start rising up on the inside of you. That's when you say, anger. You're not the boss of me. I'm on to you. You want me to think it's him. You want me to think it's her. You want me to think it's them. But anger, I'm on to you. It's me. I want something. And I'm not getting it. And anger, I'm owning my slice of the pie, and you will not control my mouth, and you will not control my mood. And besides, and I've said this every week, if you're a Christian, or if you're a Jesus follower, I like the phrase Jesus follower. If you're a Jesus follower, you already have a boss of you, right? Jesus. That's why we use the word Lord, boss. You already have a boss of you who, by the way, didn't get everything he wanted either. In fact, you have a boss who said no to himself so he could give you what you needed most. You have a boss, you have a Lord who said no to himself so that he could give you precisely what you needed most. The Apostle Paul captured this in beautiful language, and I'll close with this. He said this, talking about Jesus. Who, again, you're a Jesus follower, and he said, follow me. He said, who, Jesus, talking about Jesus, being in the very nature God. So what does God get? Well, God should get whatever he wants. What does God deserve? Whatever God deserves. What should come God's way, and everything that should just go God's way. Who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. So on multiple occasions, Jesus doesn't get what he wants. Jesus doesn't get what he deserves, and he never powered up. He never walked in and said, okay, I'm Jesus. Okay, if you've not been paying attention, I'm Jesus. So you sit down and you shut up, and I want the corner table, and I know they got here first, but ask them to move. I'm Jesus, come on. Paul said he never did that. Instead, he humbled himself. Look at this next phrase. Rather, he made himself nothing. He chose nothing over something on behalf of the world and on behalf of you, by taking the very nature of a servant. And then Paul in the same passage says, now Christians, now Jesus followers, here's what this looks like to follow Jesus. Here's what it looks like to take this idea and to live it out in the real world. And here's what he says. In your relationships with one another, in your relationships with one another, in your relationship with your father, your mother, that roommate, the boyfriend, the girlfriend, that cousin, that brother-in-law, that said what, in your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who humbled himself. And how far did he go? How low did he go? Who humbled himself by dying, and not dying just any death, Paul says, but death on a cross. It's okay not to get everything you want. It's okay not to get everything you deserve. In fact, it is better not to get everything you want and everything you deserve if that's what it takes to keep anger from being the boss of you. You see, one of the reasons following Jesus will make your life better, and one of the reasons that following Jesus makes us better at life, is that Jesus will always nudge us away from self-centeredness and arrogance to other-centeredness and humility. Jesus will always nudge you away from self-centeredness and arrogance toward other-centeredness and humility. And listen, when you move toward other-centeredness and humility, your life gets bigger and your life gets better. And you will be free to live a life where anger is not the boss of you.
Well, thank you, Andy. What a great message that I think we can all relate to. As we finish up the message for today, I want to give you a few questions to help you process what you just heard. The first question is this: describe your relationship with anger. Does it get control of your mouth or your mood? The second is, do you shout out or shut down? And well, what a great question that is. I think I tend to shut down at first until I can't handle it anymore, and then I shout out. So I think I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. And the last is, what or who are your triggers? Right? If they're sitting right beside you, please don't tell them right now. It might make someone angry. Well, today we have another helpful video for you. It's been a stressful 3 or 4 months since coronavirus changed our world, and that's brought in a lot of anxiety. And today we're going to interview Priscilla. Some of you may remember her. Priscilla is a licensed therapist who I imagine has been pretty busy over the past few months. And today she is going to share some helpful tips on how to handle anxiety in a crisis. It's going to be very helpful. Well, thanks, Priscilla, for being here today. It's an honor to have you.
Thank you so much, Jeremy, for having me.
Yeah, it's as you can tell, a lot of us have been through stress now, going on 14 weeks since the lockdown first started. Now we're free to move about, but I feel like there's been this buildup of stress. We're all experiencing new things. In this past week, Emirates laid off a lot of people, and Fly Dubai laid off a lot of people. So yeah. It's been a stressful 14 weeks. And so I'm sure there's going to be a lot of great information that you're going to be able to give us some helpful tips to help us get through this time. So basically share all your secrets to us today.
Okay, I'll try. The thing is, we are living in such an unusual time. And so the stress that we are seeing with people today is also highly unusual because it's been built up over a long period of time. And so what's interesting is that, the normal strategies and normal interventions that would work to deal with fear and anxiety and stress is not working after 14 weeks. People are just, we started off with just probably feeling frightened, a little bit concerned, now to full-blown panic. And especially if we've lost our jobs in the city, it's not easy as well. So it's been a very, very difficult time, very uncertain, very unusual. And so what we're seeing is it's a lot of people who, it's one thing to get thrown into lockdown with your significant other and children and in quarantine for a long period of time. That's added pressure itself.
It is.
And, it's not easy. I mean, if you think about all the fathers, the men who have gone out to work, I mean, now you're staying back at home. You are not only just trying to get work done, you're having to deal with your spouse and with your kids in the way. So there's a lot added to the mix. And then, of course, with a job loss as well, it's an enormous pressure as well. So some of the things that is common or what we're seeing with people today is fear is one thing, but what's more concerning is the anxiety. So it's fear that's causing a lot of worry, but the buildup of anxiety, and of course depression is also underlying it as well. So when you talk about depressive moods, just a low mood, just not wanting to get out of bed because everything is a blur. Everything is sort of just blurred into one, and it's like even, just imagine if you're at home, you don't have a set space for things. Everything is just becoming one. Your kids are in the way, your spouse is in the way, you're trying to get work done. So with just the blur of it, the weekdays now look like weekends and weekends look like weekdays. After a while, people are just losing their mood, just feeling really down, not wanting to get up, not motivated to get up and just, start the day. So we're seeing a lot of low moods, a lot of people who are feeling irritable. The next thing is when you're just having this low mood constantly, discouraged, unmotivated. After a while, it's then a lot of irritability. Then you're snapping at your spouse, then you're snapping at your kids. So you're just irritated with everything because just things are not working out. And from there, then it just starts to grow. It starts to interrupt your sleep patterns, food, not wanting to eat, losing appetite. All those are just underlying symptoms. It doesn't mean there's a disorder now. This is just underlying symptoms that all of us human beings go through, especially in prolonged periods like this.
Yeah,
so it's difficult. Yeah.
I think you've just explained about every emotion that I felt in the past 14 weeks, except for the not wanting to eat. I still had that one, unfortunately.
Exactly. So you've got other people on the other extreme who are sleeping in more and eating more. So we work on extremes. So what happens with stress, we go on extremes. So it's a loss of balance. So it's one extreme to the other. So we can either be sleeping less or sleeping more, or eating less or eating more. So it's just out of balance.
Yeah, I see. I know for me, I really struggled with the working at home and then the kids coming and interrupting me every few hours. Hey, Daddy, let's wrestle, which is fun. I had like 3 or 4 wrestle breaks a day, which has been fun to get to know my kids a little bit more. But it was definitely harder to get work done. And I also experienced times where that kind of work-life balance was also hard to manage because I could work all day that I'm awake. And I think a lot of other people were feeling the same way because they were getting text messages or, hey, let's get on a Zoom call at 8 p.m. at night. And it's like, when do I turn off?
Yes.
And so that caused a lot of, I think, possible stress.
Definitely,
for
sure.
people as well.
Absolutely, that's definitely it. And so, one of the things that really helps in such a time like this is to really establish routine. So even though we're all locked down in one space and we're going through our day, we still have to get work done, we still have to do relationships, we still have to get cooking done. So a lot of people are doing a lot more cooking at home. but the key is to actually establish some kind of routine, because that brings a lot of stability. So, one of the things, even though you're not getting up and putting on a suit to go to work, still get up in the morning, still get dressed up and present yourself well in front of your Zoom meeting. Even though you're doing a Zoom meeting, present yourself pretty well. I mean, you get up, dress up, and all of that it helps the mind sort of bring some kind of stability and understanding, like, even though I'm not leaving this space, I'm stepping into another role, or I'm stepping into another dimension right now. I'm not going out to work, I'm going to work. So it helps also kind of create, in a sense of identity and purpose. So I'm still getting dressed up, but I'm having my meeting from home. So that really helps in a season like this, to just establish routine. So you still get up in the morning. If you do, your exercise before you start your work, exercise, get to work. And of course, what is key is to establish a time where there is a cutoff. There needs to be a cutoff. So if you end work on a usual basis at 5 in the evening, then at 5 o'clock you're done. And you, of course, another thing about routine is having space as well. As you won't kind of sleep in the kitchen. So, that every room in the house has its purpose and its role in that sense. So even with just doing routine in life at home, we understand, okay, set your own workstation. Like if you have kids who are doing e-learning now, a lot of the children are at home because schools are shut, that they have their workstation. Everything is set up there. This is your study room. We're not and then the dining room is when we come together as a family and sit down and have lunch and meals together. So we can try to create that space as well and structure it that way and have routine. That brings enormous amount of stability, and it gives you a sense of purpose and direction, which is key. So that really helps as well.
Yeah, I can see how that would lessen stress if there's more stability.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, tell me, what can we do as maybe people that have not lost their jobs and things are going decent, but we've had a lot of friends that have either had a salary reduction or no pay, or maybe even lost their job. What's maybe some tips that we could do to help them?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, especially for families and even singles. People who are living here in the UAE. We are expats here. And, in a situation like this where we are far from home, we don't have our support. Such a time like this can really produce a lot of stress, especially if you've lost your job as well. So, for those of us in a city like this, we know of someone who's lost their job or they're going through a tough time. This is really a time to build community. This is where community really comes into place to actually bring, again, stability. So, for those of us who know someone who's lost a job in such a time like this, it is difficult, it is emotional, because, the next step is you're going to have to either pack up and leave, So the great way to do life with someone like that is to, and I always say, don't just WhatsApp and ask someone how you're doing. Send a voice note, because it's something about hearing people's voices that really helps to bring peace of mind and just calm to the soul. So, it's just building community and building relationship is key. So send a voice note, pick up the phone and just check in with that person. I mean, we are called to love God and love our neighbors. And so this is a perfect season to just really demonstrate what love looks like. And so it's where I encourage people to, this is key, it's fundamental for our own mental health. The more inward we are, the more stressed up we are. We got to start to look outward. And so when we start to engage with people, just check in with people, just pick up the phone and call them, have a coffee if you can, if you're not afraid to go out. It helps so much and just bring peace of mind. This is the part where, even in scripture, it even says when we actually do something for another, or do something for the least of my brethren, in that sense, when we step out and we actually call, engage with them, talk to them, pray for them, this is time it helps us as well, kind of ease the anxiety, ease the stress, where we know we're not in this alone. but we are in this together. So definitely, just relationship is big at this point. Call someone, send a voice note, encourage them, and you know what? There are a lot of tools out there. You know, there's a lot of people, a therapist myself, there's a lot of life coaches who are offering a lot of things now online as well. So it's people, if you know someone who's doing that, like just financial tips or, you know, how to get through a tough time, just direct people into those channels as well, because we need people. This is the season we need people.
Yeah, and I think that you brought up a good point that I think one of the major benefits of being in a church community is that you're able to support each other.
That's
I know in my small group, for example, we've had multiple people that have been in need, and the small group has really gone around them and helped them, has helped pay for rent, has provided food, because they had a system, they had a community around them, and that's been a really benefit for them. And so for me, I think that's one of the greatest things that the church does for people.
Absolutely, relationship is key. We don't do well in isolation. We don't do well alone. And so, in a city like this, where we are, you know, we don't have our usual support network. This is the time to actually build it. We really need each other at this point in time. Relationship is, you know, every time we build relationship and we engage with people, what we are actually unknowingly doing is we're learning how to trust as well. And trust is a big thing where it's, you know, people think the more stressed I am or the more fearful I am or the more anxious I am, it's naturally you turn inward, and you want to have more control over things. But the way to get over anxiety and to get over worry is to actually learn how to let go and to trust. And to lean into someone else. You know, we trust God in prayer, of course, and then we learn how to trust people too. And so the more we learn to open our hearts and do community and come around each other, pray for each other, help each other out, the more we feel a lot more at peace, a lot more at rest, and a lot more assured, because we're not alone. Like, okay, I've got you, you've got me. We are in this together.
Yeah, well, those are really great tips, Priscilla.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for being here. This is a big subject, so we're going to have a couple weeks where we're going to interview you. So, be more helpful tips to come here next week. So, thank you so much for being here, thank you guys for being here. We're so excited that you joined us here this week. We'll continue to see you on social media throughout the week. Until then, next Friday. Have a great week. Take care.